Pause in the football talk to talk a little baseball. Let's bring in Mike Wilner for the Deep Left Field podcast. Brandon Belt had his second multi-homer game. Hyun Jin Ryu won consecutive starts, and the Blue Jays routed the Reds 10-3 Sunday to take 2 of 3 on the weekend. Kevin Kiermaier, Bo Bichette, and George Springer also had solo homers. They're off today. Mike, good to see you again, my friend. This Blue Jays season continues to just be up and down like a toilet seat. How are you on the Jays today in terms of how good of a team they are?
I've never heard up and down like a toilet seat before. I mean, it's a good team. It's a good team. It's a long season. They have the 8th best record in Major League Baseball, but they're not in a playoff spot right now. So I think that, they should be a lot better than they are. I don't think there's any question about that. We all thought going into the season that they would be comfortably in a playoff spot all year and have a shot at the division title, but it's just not. It's not the way it works. It's not. As I say so many times to so many people, it's not hockey, and it's not hockey means a lot of things. One, there aren't a lot of teams who are comfortably in a playoff spot all year long. The Blue Jays were in a playoff spot last year every day of the season, but it got a little touchy every once in a while. But also, it's not hockey in that it's very easy to overcome deficits, where in hockey it's not, because the teams ahead of you are getting points for losing games all the time, and it doesn't work like that in baseball. So, I mean, are they guaranteed to make the playoffs? No, but they never were. Nobody is. It's a very difficult game in which to make the postseason, even with the extra spots. Should they make the playoffs? Absolutely. Do I think they will? Yeah, and I think they will without much of a question when it comes down to it at the end.
Well, a bit of a recent swoon, Red Series aside, coincided with Bo Bichette being out. What does he mean to this team, not just on the field, but in that locker room, Mike, that you know of?
I mean, he's the best hitter on the team. And we all expected that to be Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but hasn't happened for the last couple of years. But Bo's got a really good chance of winning a batting title. He's leading the league in hits for a 3rd straight year. He's rewriting the record book for the Blue Jays as far as hits are concerned. And he's a real cog right up at the top of that lineup. So he's hugely important for them. And the fact that they were able to tread water and play 500 without him is pretty good, considering the way the rest of the offense has gone all season. I think in the locker room, in the clubhouse, I think he's as loud a voice as he wants to be. He's not a real rah-rah guy, but he's also extraordinarily respected by everyone in that room because of the amount of work he does and the preparation and just the how much he pays in sweat to get ready for every game. I think Matt Chapman is a very loud voice in that room, and people listen the few times when he talks, and I think it's the same way for Bo. I don't know. It doesn't feel to me like he's someone who's going to just sit down and address the whole team, or someone who's going to throw a bunch of chairs around a clubhouse, but I think that when he does have something to say, people really perk up and listen.
Please finish this sentence for me, Mike. The Blue Jays will contend for a World Series if
they make the playoffs. That's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. They make the playoffs. They're as good or better than anybody in there. And, I was watching, I don't know, it was one of the games in the last homestand. It was, I think it was the Hicks to Romano game, the first time the two of them pitched at the back of a ball game together, and Hicks pitched the 8th and Romano pitched the 9th. And after the game, sitting waiting for John Schneider to come into the interview room post game, one of the other beat reporters, someone who's been doing this almost as long as I have, turned to me and said, they're going to win the World Series. And I was like, you know what? They're probably going to win the World Series if they get in. Everyone has always said for years and years and years, pitching and defense wins championships. The Blue Jays have the best pitching and defense in the major leagues. What they have to do is get into the playoffs. But once they do, they've got the tools to shut down every team they play, they just have to score enough, and that's been the issue all season long.
You know what? That's what I wanted to get from you team-wise today, but let me just end it with this. And we got some time here. Broadcaster to broadcaster, how do you feel about the Baltimore Orioles suspending Kevin Brown, their play-by-play guy, for reading unflattering stats on the air? You best
They weren't even unflattering. They weren't even unflattering.
So however you want to say it, how did you feel about that?
I first of all don't understand how ownership looks at that and says this is making us look bad. What Kevin Brown said was that they'd won more games against Tampa Bay this year than they'd won in the last 3 years combined. And it's not like he just said it. There was a graphic set up that everybody knew that this was something they were going to talk about. It was in the press notes that day. It is just a ludicrous, embarrassing, I think it was Gary Cohen of the Mets who said that the Orioles have draped themselves in humiliation. And I think that was a brilliant way to put it. It's a ridiculous thing. You don't want a broadcaster who's going to, for lack of a better word, piss on your shoes and tell you that it's raining. You want someone who's going to tell you what's going on right in front of you. You don't want, maybe, if you're a team controlled broadcast, you don't want someone going off the rails and talking about how they're terrible and ownership is a mess and all this stuff. Fine, because they work for you, whatever. But you have to be real and you have to say what's really going on. And to say, hey, how great is this? They had such trouble against this team for the last 3 years, and now they've beaten them so much more often this year. First of all, it's a positive. Second of all, it was set up. So if you're suspending Kevin Brown but not suspending everybody in the truck and your entire PR department who wrote that in the notes, then you're very misguided. But it's obviously, there's so few things in this world anymore, Rod, get universally one side of an opinion on it. And no one in the world in which we exist has agreed with the Orioles' decision on Kevin Brown. Everyone has talked about how terrible they were. And so, every once in a while, when the whole world is on one side of something, it's a pretty obvious thing.
Well, it's an injustice for sure, but as I've learned lately, you just got to kind of let these things go. Google Kevin Brown, it'll come up forever. Orioles broadcaster suspended for it, ... And I'm not sure if I ever told you, but I spent 20 years play-by-play in the Canadian Football League, 20 years play-by-play in major junior hockey with the Regina Pats, and I had one team guy come up to me one time and say, "You're making us look bad." I'm like, "No, you're making you look bad. What do you want from me?"
Right.
So I don't know that it's just a Baltimore thing. I just think it's the way that it is. But any last thoughts before I let you go, Mike?
They didn't take you off the air. They just told you, right? So
yeah.
The last thoughts are just, look, baseball's a long season. Teams fall in and out of the playoffs all the time. The Blue Jays, after this series against Baltimore, have, I think, Colorado, Washington, Oakland, Kansas City. So Seattle's won 19 out of their last 24 games. Then they did that just to make it to within a half a game of the Jays, just to be a half game ahead of them. So there's no chance they keep up this level of performance for the rest of the year. It's, for some people, fun to ride the roller coaster of living and dying with every game and going nuts looking at the standings every day and flipping out. It's not the way to do it in baseball for your health. You just can't. So you got to let a season breathe. This season is breathing a little oddly, but there's still a quarter of it to go, and just enjoy the ride. That's all. Enjoy. Don't worry.
Yeah, like you say, they're a good team. You've always been the voice of reason for me when it comes to the Blue Jays, because I don't know enough about it, Mike. So I appreciate this. Hopefully we can do it again in the fall.
All right. Happy to do it, Rod. Thanks.
The great Mike Wilner from the Deep Left Field podcast.